Welcome to Inflection Points. Join hosts Carla Guzzetti and Tim Harrison as we explore Extreme's vision of the infinite enterprise. We see a world where people have become infinitely distributed around the globe, which means businesses must work at scale and focus increasingly on becoming consumer-centric to connect with each and every one of them. Let's be honest, when you first heard it, did you have to be convinced about the infinite enterprise as a concept, or were you all in?
Well, okay, if I'm going to be really honest in a conversation that's just between you and me,
nobody will ever hear this.
No one's ever going to hear the secret. I had to be explained to the infinite enterprise a couple of times before I completely wrapped my brain around it.
Fair enough. Now we have a chance to see if that actually sank in.
See if it really works.
All right, this is the test. Can you explain the infinite enterprise?
So when I first started, it took me a couple of times to let it sink in, but I did when I finally started to let it sink in, the idea that because of the pandemic, all of these trends that we were seeing in technology, and particularly around people being dispersed, having to deliver customer centricity and really being able to scale to one, I could see all of that, and I understood why the pandemic really caused the acceleration of all of this technology, and that essentially we were going to be in a new normal because we had not gone through something like this in recent modern times. And it was a unique opportunity for technology to respond in a way that we've not had to in the past. We were responding not because we could develop technology, but because we had to. Our lives actually depended on it. And once I understood that and I started to see all of the trends, I went, I'm in. This is a thing. Everything is going to be different whenever this pandemic is over, and we are going to be in a new normal. And we already were in a new normal at the time when we first started talking about the infinite enterprise.
So many new normals.
New normals, but it's true. We are. I mean, we're all, and you can see the world still struggling with it, right? What is people being called back to the office, still some waves of COVID coming. People are, uncertain, but we're all ready to get back together. But, we like also working in our sweatpants at home and don't want to go back to the office full time. We're grappling with the new normal. And that's just the way it's going to be, because we've spent the last 2 years working in this environment where we're 100% distributed, and we have to make everything work for us individually. And now that we have that, there is a good majority of people who don't want to go back.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of the concept of the infinite enterprise is the unknown, right? Being able to have that experience wherever you are, whether you're at an office or whether you're at home or whether you're out in a park, right? Yep. So being able to consume the way you want to consume wherever, and with an experience that is consistent all the way across. So I think that's a fantastic example. So I think you passed your test. You did a great job.
I've got my infinite enterprise PhD.
That's right. You get a little badge, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we opened up season 1 with Nabil's big idea of the infinite enterprise. It was one of the most popular episodes. So check it out. But what has changed?
I mean, I think we've just talked about there's so much that has changed, and we're starting to grapple with what is happening now that the pandemic is beginning to come to an end. And we know that the world is never going to be the same. But here's the point to all the business leaders. I think in season 1, we spent a lot of time questioning, is this actually going to come to fruition? And I think in this season, we have provided so many proof points of so many businesses that have really developed under these tenets of the infinite enterprise, being able to work in a distributed model, being able to work at scale, and being consumer centric. And so now the point is, it is here, it is proven, and now business decision makers have to act on this. They have to be thinking about how their strategies have to change. They've already probably done it in maybe inches, but now they need to be thinking about how they're going to do it in feet or in, centimeters or meters if you're, from that part of the world.
Thank you. I was going to correct you, but yeah, I appreciate that.
And now we're going to go and talk to the one person who does that at extreme, who thinks about how we're going to move in yards day by day and how we are thinking around corners about the infinite enterprise for all of our customers.
Absolutely. So Nabil is the Chief Technology Officer and Chief Product Officer at Extreme Networks. He's the man whose job it is to have the crystal ball at Extreme. He has to look into the future to see the products that we need. And that's why we started this whole podcast, because we really like what he was seeing there, a concept for business that can be a guide on how to make decisions during the pandemic and its aftermath.
Nabil, it's been a year since we first started talking about the infinite enterprise. That was our inaugural episode on the podcast where you came on, you told us, this is what we see. This is what we're doing as an office of the CTO. And a lot has happened in the last year. So, give us a pulse check. How are things going according to what we first discussed? And how do you see if the infinite enterprise has evolved or changed? And, tell us what you think is going on right now.
Well, of course, Carla, first, thank you. Thank you for having me again on the show. I hear the show is doing really well. So super excited about that. Thank you, Tim. Always good to see you. Yeah, wow. It's already been a year. That probably went by in a flash. But yes, look, Infinite Enterprise back then, when I talked to you guys, it was just an idea. It was very early on. We were still in the thick of the pandemic. People were still trying to just wrap their minds around what the pandemic is, how is it impacting us? And that was then. And now, a year later, yes, the pandemic is still around, but I think generally speaking, people's thoughts are now more directed towards what's the life like post-pandemic, right? In some ways, how do we live with it? In some ways, how do we kind of move beyond that? And so there's been a pretty big shift, if you would, in terms of where people are, where their heads at, what businesses are thinking about. Back then, businesses were still thinking about how to react to the pandemic. And here we were coming on a podcast and telling them that, hey, they need to look at the future and that they need to make these calls that were 5 years ahead and the time is now, or you're already late and things like that. And people were like, what the hell are you guys talking about? We're just trying to keep the business running. But I think that has moved on. And now more and more people are like, yes, the world in a post-pandemic scenario is not going to be the same. Earlier it was like, oh, I remember I had this conversation with you, Carla and Tim. Will we ever go back to the way we were before? Right. And it was like, oh, we got to place a bet. Well, I don't think it's a bet any longer. I think people already know that the world has already changed and now going back is not the question any longer. But it has been replaced by different questions. Now the question is like, okay, the world is not going to go back. The world is changing. The world is becoming infinitely distributed. We do have to listen to the consumer no matter what business we are in. And not only just listen to them, we have to reconstitute our entire enterprise, our entire business to revolve around the consumer. I think those fundamentals that we put forward a year ago, I don't believe they are in question any longer. Yep. That's a general consensus is developing around it and people are like accepting it. But it has been replaced by other questions of, well, how do I do it? How do we implement it? Back then it was take the decision now. Now we're talking about what is that decision? So I feel that in 1 year, Infinite Enterprise has come along a long ways, if you would, from being a concept and a question and a bet to almost near certainty. And now people are thinking about what do I pack for the journey rather than whether I should take this journey. So that has been the big shift, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think this entire season, we've been talking to a number of CEOs and innovators whose businesses all follow the tenets of the infinite enterprise. So it has to be consumer centric. It has to be at scale. It has to meet distribution. It's distributed everywhere. We've seen that again and again. And I think that you're completely correct in the sense that it has been confirmed. This isn't an idea anymore. It is definitely the new normal. These are the things that every company has to address. And hopefully everybody has already started on this path. But we've also seen some really interesting other themes that have come out from our conversations. We've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs and readers, and we wanted to talk to you about the themes that we heard as well and get your thoughts. And has a big part of your job as the CTO here at Extreme Networks. But we've noticed that there's an increasingly complex relationship between technology and the natural world. We had one guest come on and say, it is not natural for us to actually ingest information through words. It's more natural to ingest information through pictures. And, I guess the big question here is, can tech actually enable a more natural world for us to get us back to our more natural state? What do you think about that and how tech in the natural world actually plays off of each other?
Well, absolutely. Look, I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer that technology is for the sake of humans and not the other way around. And I do believe that in the last, I wanted to say a few decades, but I would say almost about 100 years, I think technology has run ahead so fast. And there has been a lot of technology for the sake of technology, and nothing wrong with that. This is progress, right? This is innovation. This is learning something new, pushing the envelope a little bit. But I feel it is the time where there is a little bit of recalibration of what technology means to us as a society, as an individual, as a human. And is it that because technology can do something, we should adjust our culture and our way of living to incorporate that into our lives? Or should it be the other way around, where we want our way of life, our society to be a certain way, and we want technology to come enable that? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a subtle difference, but a very significant one. People running after technology versus technology enabling people, right? That's the big conversation. And I believe that we are at the cusp of that era where it's us as humans, as individuals, as society, as a community, which decides the way forward, which imagines the way forward, which draws the way forward. And then technology comes in and helps us accomplish that, enable that, maybe make it faster or easier, or whatever the case might be. So yes, I absolutely believe in that. And talking about languages versus recording history and pictorials, that is a really, really interesting idea. And it reminds me of the Egyptians way back in the time. That is what their language was, mm-hmm. right? And the other part also is languages come and go. Obviously, when you're talking about that kind of a scale, but visuals could be very, very powerful. But look, that is a way of bringing infinite enterprise and taking that at scale concept to stretch across time. Mm-hmm. Saying that not only at scale, well, here, the outcome is the history. And this gentleman, I would love to talk to this gentleman, but he's not thinking about just doing it at scale today, but doing it at scale across many tomorrows. And this is just another dimension of the same thing. And this is why I feel so confident that not only that this idea has feet to it, which is good, but I'm confident that this is a turning point in our relationship with technology, and to a large extent, a shift in our relationship to our surroundings. A little bit more symbiotic, if you would, a little bit more not by default that is just happening because I wanted to do X and because of that A, B, and C, the environment and this and that, everything went down the way hole, but a little bit more conscientious, if you would, right?
Yep.
More awareness. And that's really, truly the evolution of the human mankind.
So does that mean that technology is now much more a part of the natural world than it was before? Or is that a continuation of that vision?
So Tim, let me think about that. I mean, I wouldn't say that technology was not part of the natural world before, but I would say that perhaps the balance was shifted a little bit. I mean, we can't say that, when we created the steam engine, that was not part of the real world, or the press in Netherlands, that was not part of it, or the computer and the stuff. I mean, they're very much part of the natural world. They're very much part of us. But the way I think about it is, since I have a 4-year-old, and I know you have a young one as well, and I have a 2-year-old now as well, if you give them a toy that is perhaps for age higher than theirs. So think about a 2-year-old. If you give them a 6-year-old toy, what would happen? The first few times, they would try it. They maybe got frustrated. They will probably figure out a way to use it some other way, right? Or they might discard it, put it away. But then eventually they will catch up and they'll come back to that toy, right? I know, weird analogy, but that's how I think about technology. I think technology moved a little bit faster ahead, and we as society took a little longer to catch up, where it is, as a 2-year-old, the toy is for me. I am not for the toy, right? So that's how I believe our relationship with technology is shifting and morphing, still in subtle ways, but progressively more obvious, in my opinion.
That's really interesting, because it leads me on to another question regarding that, is that how do we know that we are making technology for people? If, we have that sort of slight stretch between the ability to use the technology and harness it in an appropriate way or an effective way and people's needs. How do we know that we're building something for somebody's needs?
That is a very interesting question. And this is something I was recently talking to somebody about, and I was describing the difference between science and technology. Science is for the sake of discovery. I want to take 2 high-speed atoms and crash them together because I want to know what happens, right? Mm-hmm. And this is how you move society forward. But technology, application of technology, should not be without purpose. And the purpose for that must be the consumer. And here you can take the definition of consumer, bring it out of the context of the enterprise, and convert it into the individual. So either the individual human or a collection of them, community, society, whatever you want to call it. I believe that technology should be developed and will progressively get developed for the sake of a certain outcome, an improvement, a betterment of the human condition, of the society. And when that happens, that's when I feel, that the technology and humans are in sync, or are in an equilibrium, or are in a synergistic, combination, whatever term you want to use. So I differentiate between science and technology. Science for the sake of discovery, for the unexpected, for the revelations. Technology for the sake of experience, for the sake of people, for the sake of betterment, for the sake of impact. At least that's how I wrap my head around these two things.
Which I think is fascinating. And I think also what we're saying here is that the pandemic really was the first time where technology had to react to a person's needs, to society's needs. And what we're saying here is, we're going to be more conscientious about how technology supports the consumer moving forward, which is why that's really part of, the cornerstone of the infinite enterprise and what we're trying to say. And I think that is a massive shift from where we have been as a society before and how we've looked at technology. And I really like the way that you separate the difference between science and what technology is in the future.
Yeah, and every downside has an upside, and every upside has a downside. I was actually talking to one of our Dutch friends, and apparently that's a big saying. down there, but I love it, right? Whether you call it silver lining, but I like the upside and downside kind of being together. But that's the upside of the pandemic. It's almost like, imagine, I love visuals and analogies and stuff. Imagine somebody running behind, a bus because they think that they're going to miss the bus, and they run and run and they're not thinking about anything, and they just want to catch onto the bus, and they reach out and the bus just slipped past their finger. What then? Now they got to sit and wait for the next bus. And in that time, it allows them the opportunity to consider whether they want to take this bus or a different one, if this journey is worth it or not. And this is how I feel this pandemic almost was humanity missing a bus and getting that time out in the bus stop and getting an opportunity to think about what matters, where are we headed, is this the direction we want to go? And it's interesting that for the first time in the human history, we were all having the same experience of having extra time at the bus stop collectively as a species. You remember, that's where I started from last season, that there has never been an event like this in the history of mankind because of the speed, because of the impact, and because that it impacted all of us together, almost real time. So this is almost like a real time epiphany that 10 billion people had, right? And this is unique. This is just absolutely unique. And I cannot wait to see what we as humans realized in those 5 minutes that we were left alone at the bus station, and what we'll do with that. So I believe future is bright. Sometimes it doesn't feel like so, especially these days, but I do believe the future is bright. I do believe this is a huge turning point, a cardinal moment, a pivot point, a moment in history, however you want to describe it. And the future humans will look back at this moment and say, that is when we took the right turn and headed in the right direction. And hopefully those people are sitting not just on Earth, but a lot of planets with peace and prosperity and in a very evolved situation. But this would be one of those moments that they will read about, they will talk about. That's my belief and that's my hope.
What I love about that bus stop metaphor is that there are opportunities for people to think differently about the circumstance as they're at the bus stop. So this season, we spoke to many different entrepreneurs. Some were visionaries, right? Alexei Kitrov, who believes that we'll unlock doors with our eyes. Some were problem solvers, like Nisha, who of Design Duality, where they found an international market that wasn't being served and built an app to serve that market. Some called themselves problem solvers, but were actually visionaries, like Philip Reese, who saw his airline business was being threatened and pivoted to drones, or as he calls them, flying robots, and has had great success. So are both approaches valid today? Does one trump the other? As these different types of people are sitting at the bus stop, how do you see those different approaches? Are they necessary to both be there to be able to succeed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and they work very well together. I mean, like in any kitchen, you need a chef, but you also need a sous chef. Right. And the difference is the chef is creating this amazing concoction or dish of like all the thing. And the sous chef is making sure that is not just a pipe dream, that it actually makes on a plate to somebody, right? I think I've gotten their roles correctly, but you can make another, you can take any other analogy, right? So there are dreamers and there are doers, and the doers require dreamers and the dreamers require the doers. And together with both of them, we, the humans, move forward. So yes, the visionaries have to be there because they are thinking about the art of possible. What is possible? And then there are these problem solvers who are thinking about the science of possible, that how do you make the possible possible, right? How can you stretch the possible on one side and how can you make that possible on another side? So I think society requires both of them. We require both of them, and you will always have both of them, right? And that has always been, by the way, the case. that's nothing new. It's always been, we have dreamers and we have doers.
Mm-hmm.
But what is, or what is different now, in my opinion at least, is I believe that in a certain way, for the first time, the focus of both the dreamers and the doers have become the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the human experience. I was talking to some people from New York, financial world and stuff, and they were talking about asset classes and this and that, and they were like saying, "Oh, we really believe that data is the new asset class," and I was like, "Yes, that was 10 years ago." and I didn't mean it to be like, snubbing them back, but what I was trying to get them to think of was that data is already an asset class, but data actually is a commodity. There is so much data out there, and there's more data being produced and stuff. Data is going to be like the oil, like the crude oil coming out of the ground. Hopefully we did stop using crude oils, but you get the analogy, right? Or it is the energy coming from the solar cells or whatever, right? It is going to become a commodity. But what is going to become a real true asset class is experience. Now you'd be like, why did you take that left turn all of a sudden? I'm going to bring it back. So for the first time, I believe that the dreamers and the doers are both focused on that human experience or the consumer experience in the infinite enterprise context. At the same time, the consumers have had a 5-minute extra time to think about at the bus stop, and all these things are converging. We as humans now believe that, you know what? We deserve to live our lives the way we want to live them. We deserve to work from wherever we want to work from. We deserve to get services the way we want. And then the visionaries are realizing more and better and unique ways of, imagining new experience. And the doers are figuring out making those visionary things possible. And the consumers are ready to accept that. And the whole entire financial system is starting to recognize that asset classes could be other than what we are used to, whether it's data or experience. So I think it is a convergence of a lot of different threads brought together where they can form something really unique for us as humans. And that's the beauty of, that's why they've always been there, doers, dreamers. We've always required them, but there is this convergence of things that is happening right now, which, by the way, I would still say is very nascent. So it could fizzle out. I hope not, but it could. But I believe it won't.
It's really interesting. And there's several things that I have come to a conclusion from based on just the last couple of minutes. I think one thing that stands out to me from what you just said is, first of all, for the first time, we have both visionaries and problem solvers that are unified by a single vision, which is the experience. And I think also what's interesting about that is that when you have them working together and unified on one vision, it means that we have experience at scale. We're able to scale solutions all around the world. And it's not just about, necessarily driving revenue. It's about the experience of the human condition, right? And that is a very unique point in time that we've not necessarily had before. What's also really interesting is that both visionaries and problem solvers both can operate under the umbrella of the infinite enterprise, and both have very real opportunities in the infinite enterprise as well.
Yeah, and absolutely, right? And look, I mean, no matter how you look at it, you one way or another will reach a very similar conclusion. You talked about at scale. I remember, early on, I said scale has two different things. One is like, hey, you want to do it across the board globally, and that's where we spend a lot of time. But I remember I briefly touched on it last time. I'm sure I did, and if I didn't, I'll do it now. Which was,
you did.
You have heard me talk about this quite a bit, which is the scale to one, which is the ultimate scale, which means taking the 8, 9, 10 billion people that are on this planet and optimizing their experience for them simultaneously across the board all the time, which is as if you scale to such a point that the only thing that matters is that one human, all of them, right? That's the ultimate of scale. And if you think about now bringing back to what you were saying, this is the first time where, by the way, the dreamers have been thinking about this for a long time. Visionaries have always had this thought, but this is the first time where the problem solvers and the doers have actually the capability to make it real. That is unique in the history of mankind, where our capabilities are catching up with our dreams, and our dreams are catching up with our responsibilities, which is the impact and the experience of a society. That's the convergence that I talk about. That is where we as species, as society, can evolve to the next level, where it is not about just business. It is not just about creating new products. Everything is about improving the human condition. The visionaries are imagining bigger, better, bolder ways of what that could mean. And the doers and the problem solvers have the technology at their disposal to make that real. Imagine what future will create. I can't wait to see it.
So this takes me to I suspect, a really tactical question. And I think I asked you this when we first discussed this last year. As we've gone through the season, what we've seen our guests have been actually taking action and starting to deliver things. So how do you make these decisions as this world continues to be somewhat uncertain? More to the point, what is the one thing that every business leader should be doing now? We talked about that last year. Has that changed? Is there anything that they're not doing that they should be doing at this point?
Obviously, I can't answer if all of them are doing what they need to do. But let's take a hypothetical business leader, right? The interesting thing about being a business leader is that it has a little bit of both. There is the dreamer and then there is the doer, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to think of new things and you got to boldly move the company forward or whatever you're running. But at the same time, you got to have your feet on the ground and you got to be able to, run the company on a day-to-day basis, right? Just like us, we do it on a daily basis. So there's a little bit of both. And I believe back then, the conversation that you were referring to was like, hey, do not wait, take action. The cost of not taking the action is much higher than any cost of taking the wrong decision. I remember something like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Right. I briefly remember what I said. But now I think we have progressed a little bit, as I said earlier. Now it is like, okay, what decisions? And here, look, I don't have the hubris to tell anybody what to do, but I'll share what I do. Perfect. As somebody that makes these decisions on a daily basis for a relatively large company. When you are in the context of the visionary, think about revolutionary changes. When you are in the context of the doer or the problem solver, think about evolutionary changes and marry the two together. That's it. As simple as that, right?
Well, it's easy peasy.
Right.
But that's really the concept. The key is that as a business leader, you're always on two tracks, right? So you're dealing with the art of the possible and the science of the possible as well. You're thinking new ways to increase your business or have bigger impact and everything, but you're also constrained by the reality of your resources, human resources, time resources, money resources, right? And the key is to really marry it together. Now, my recommendation to fellow business leaders is do not over-rotate on one or the other side and keep both sides moving. Do not stop dreaming because you don't have the resources to do it today. And do not stop doing it because you're too busy dreaming up something big. Mm-hmm. So movement on both sides. And that's, by the way, not easy. And in a lot of companies, those kind of roles get split between different people. And there the organizational structure matters where you have to bring them together. But companies right now they need to make those small changes on a daily basis, just that tiny single step towards the vision of the infinite enterprise, while they are still figuring out what infinite enterprise means to them, if that makes sense, right? You haven't figured out whether since I am in Canada, you haven't figured out whether you're going to go to Quebec or Montreal, right? And you're in Canada, and you're sitting in Toronto. Well, start walking north. At some point, you will figure it out. So don't just sit around waiting and trying to decide. You get what I'm saying, right? So that's the responsibility of business leaders at this point in time, where now we all need to become infinite enterprise. That is not under question. But the question is, what does it mean to me? But while you're figuring it out, don't sit around. Start taking the steps. So that will be my, last year was more about, make a call. Now it is like, you've already made the call. You might not know exactly what it means, but go ahead and take the first few steps. Don't sit and wait.
Nabil, I think this is a great place to wrap up our conversation, because it gives all of our listeners something tactical to really take away with. And I think that the call to action is really loud and clear now that we're a year in. It's not just make a call, but now's the time to move. Now's the time to think about what can you do right now and what do you have to keep on dreaming about so that you can move forward. And I want to thank you so much for being back and coming back on the show with us. It's been an incredible conversation, and there's been so much that we've been able to unpack and take away. And I think, season 2 has been fantastic because we've actually been able to prove we have all the points. The infinite enterprise is here. Now's the time to act.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I love coming on the show. I think you guys have done a fantastic job here. And thank you for inviting me again. And my parting words, dream the dreams, do the deeds, and we'll make this world a better place. Thank you so much, and talk to you soon.
What have we learned this year? Please give me a summary of what you think we've really taken away from this year.
I would say our capabilities are catching up with our dreams.
That is both beautiful and true.
I cannot claim to have said that. That is what Nabil said. And you listen to the people we've talked to and what their plans are for the future, and it's very hard to disagree. So many dreams being realized and pursued here. We're at a major shift. Our ability to create technology is astounding, and it's moving really rapidly. The question is how to do it, not if you should. That's been the big shift over the year. Nabil underlined that, but you see the successes of the people who acted. It's go time, if you will. Companies are making decisions and making moves to become infinite enterprises. Yep.
And I think that this entire season has been nothing but proof points to that. I mean, our guest in episode 4, Philip Reese, he used to own an airline and he decided to switch to drones. It's not a small decision, but it's one that has worked for him, and it's so timely. I mean, we're talking about avatars and how they empower the world to take a chance on making Hollywood movies from their home even better. And that was what we covered in episode 1. And then finally, we can't forget design duality and the app that can sell saris around the world. We covered that in episode 6. And the innovation isn't stopping, it's accelerating. And the big question we have to say to everyone is, are you ready? As a business, how are you not asking this question? How are you not thinking about how you're going to drive your business forward based on what we are seeing happen in the infinite enterprise and becoming your own infinite enterprise?
That's right. Yeah, we are living the experience. And, when we started discussing this, we were discussing, what do you need to change? How should you change? And now we're already in the process. We're here. So, you got to be changing along with the rest of the world, because all of the ways that we go to market, all of the ways that we look at technology are changed. They have changed. The bus is going, right? You got to get on the bus or you don't get on the bus.
Or you're going to miss the bus.
Right. And as somebody who's missed the bus once or twice and watched it disappear off into the distance, that's a bad place to be sometimes when you watch other people being successful around you and really understanding why they should be on that bus and you're not. So I think we've given, as you said, so many examples of how to be successful, how to take that chance, how to live in the infinite enterprise, and how to start producing and delivering technology within the infinite enterprise. I don't think that there's a choice here. The choice has been made. We now have to live with these new ways of delivering technology or working with customers or delivering new products. I think that's really important to understand.
I think it is. And it's been an amazing 2 seasons of the podcast. First, unpacking what is the infinite enterprise. And then second, proving that it is here and there are businesses moving towards it. And I've really enjoyed the season and I can't wait to see what we do next. And that is what we have for the season. So I'm going to see you next season, Tim.
That's right. You will. I'll be there.
And so will I think.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, we'll hopefully both be there somewhere in the infinite enterprise. Thanks so much, Carla. I'll see you soon.
Bye, Tim.